Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? This is not so much a reading video today. This is me talking about writing because things are going really well on that front. I got back into the habit of writing a lot more regularly than I have been last year. Part of it is because of the short story prompts that I responded to for a small publisher. So far, I've written and submitted 3. They accepted 1. I would have liked it a lot better when I was batting 1,000, but whatever. Like it's good to go through that experience. Like you need the rejection sometimes, even when the response is like, "You did fine. We just didn't need this story." Like, okay, you got to understand that just because you can self-publish anything doesn't mean that the publisher's going to take everything. So whatever. But I've been thinking a lot more about the analysis that I do on movies. I do some of it here. I've moved most of that stuff over to the other channel, and then when I write it, I do it on Substack. Last week I had a really detailed post that went up about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, and how like I take it as a challenge to say like, okay, if I wanted this to be good but it wasn't, what needed to be fixed? And as part of the challenge, I can't do a drastic ground up rewrite. I want to take most of the same pieces that they've said, unless something really flagrantly doesn't work, and say, okay, with these same pieces, what needs to change, what needs to be improved on, so that the story works a lot better, so that these characters have more meaningful journeys throughout the story. The reason I do that is, I mean, obviously no Hollywood executive is going to say, it's like, oh, look at this a-hole out in Oklahoma. He obviously knows what we don't know. Like, none of them are going to care. I do this a lot more for my own benefit, because as I'm writing and drafting more, like the writing process can be screwy and difficult. And there are times when you plot something out, you outline it, you plan it, whatever, and then you sit down and you actually draft it, and it just gets completely away from you. What you end up writing might still be good, but it doesn't take you where you need to go in order to tell a story that you wanted to tell. And that can work for you, that can work against you, whatever. This book that I'm working on right now for another publisher, they've got some parameters as far as word count and stuff like that. And as I'm reading through my third draft of it, I can tell where parts of it are lagging, parts of it aren't clicking with me well enough, and if there are little hiccupy spots here and there, it's like, well, if me, the writer, is not enjoying this part, I can't expect a reader to. And so I'll have to stop and go chew on it for a day while I'm at work. I haven't been doing as many audiobooks lately. I've instead just been playing music and thinking about what I'm writing, because if something's not working, I need to fix it. Analyzing movies and shows that mostly work but need some repairs done to them is part of that exercise process. It's how I practice being critical of my own work and saying, what is not clicking here? What am I missing? What direction do I need to take this to make it work? And I've had a couple of those epiphany type moments with this manuscript right now. It's a middle grade book for boys. And I keep thinking like, okay, I want to take it here, 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 and here. And then I try to get there, and it's like, okay, I'm either going to need another 10,000 words to make all these pieces work, or I need to hit their word count limit and actually come in a good chunk under it, so that it's not pushing the envelope. It's more of the size that they're looking for, and it still accomplishes what the story really needs it to and what the characters need it to. And even just today, like earlier this week, I finished the second draft, but I had to really just there's this expression that I heard on X from a military veteran, and it pops into my head more than I would want it to. Hammered dog crap is the expression that he uses. And I have moments where I'm trying to write and it feels like I'm just hitting a turd with a sledgehammer. It's like, you can't fix this, you're just making it worse. And I got to stop and go back and think like, oh crap, what do I need to fix? Like, that was the final chapter for a number of reasons, namely that in the big climactic final battle scene of the book, I ended up setting up some stakes that I couldn't satisfy them without, again, another 5,000 words or a Deus Ex Machina. Neither of those things would work for me, would work for this story. And so I've been analyzing it and thinking, okay, what do I do instead? I'm going to have to do a bit of the Smallville thing where you get to the end and somebody's going to have retrograde short-term amnesia. Otherwise, the consequences would drag the story out too long for the first book. However, I can make it work in such a way that the bill is going to come due for those consequences in the second and third. It'll work well as a band-aid for the first one so that I can resolve the other big issues in the story, and then that character who gets the short-term memory wipe will have some consequences from it. Not necessarily in the form of, oh, wait a minute, I'm starting to have these weird dreams and I remember something that I think I forgot. Like, not in a Jason Bourne sense, but she's going to be afraid of some things that she doesn't understand why, and it's because of experiences that she has in the first book. So the point of analyzing movies and books like that, and reading things that I love, or even reading things that I only sort of love, and think like, okay, this would work better if XYZ. The point of that is to make myself better as a writer. That said, I'm not trying to read so much in terms of like the title count of books every single month, because the point is not volume consumption. I'm trying to go for more quality consumption. And one thing that I'm paying a lot of attention to this year is this book that I'm reading, or this audiobook that I'm listening to, which is still a form of reading, Suck on It, Sean, is it something that I really want to? Like, if I'm not reading it, am I thinking about getting back to it? And more often than not, the answer to that question is no. I just listen to audiobooks a lot because I have the time to do so at work. But if I wasn't really that enamored with it, would I keep reading? And how often do I push to read a book that I'm not super thrilled about, and I get to the end and it's like, wow, I'm really glad that I finished it? Or is my response just, all right, another one down? I'm trying to really find quality books that either work as just fantastic fiction, or they fill a research need for me in terms of nonfiction. Like, the whole point of this is to get better at producing and creating. I've talked a lot over the last year about the YouTuber, your boy Zach. I'm definitely a fanboy reply guy of his stuff, just because like he struck on something that I recognized without realizing that I was recognizing it or knowing how to put it into words, and that's that the culture war around art, specifically around comic books and movies, but it also happens in the sci-fi space. There are just fewer sci-fi readers than there are film goers and things like that. It's become mask off for both sides of the political spectrum. It's just that for a long time, the left dominated it, and then the reprisal on the right came back so hard that people are buying books that they don't read just because the right people wrote them. And I'm not going to name any names here. I'm not going to get into that. But he says a lot of these campaigns and IPs and whatever, they're just like, oh, look how many books we sold. Look how much money we made. And he's like, yeah, but how many people are actually making videos or posting reviews about this stuff? How many people are actually reading it, or are they just posting pictures and say, woo, I got mine? Are the people doing any of this because they love the art, or is it just so that they can say, oh, look, we made a product and it's more successful than the other side's product? And it's like, I'm not interested at all in having people pick up my books because, oh, Graham Bradley is vaguely right-wing or Christian or whatever. Like, I want to write great art and just happen to be a right-of-center Christian constitutionalist, whatever. I had the chance earlier this week to be on a podcast with George Alexopoulos, G Prime 85, probably the best working political cartoonist of our time. But he's more than just a political cartoonist. It just happens that that's the thing that he's most known for. But he's done graphic novel illustration. He's working on some children's books and stuff. He's a full-time artist. Like, he has the job that I want because he made the sacrifices in his 20s to make that happen. And he's hammered on this point a lot. Invariably, whenever you see me posting on X or other platforms about how much I freaking hate Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire and what they're doing to arts in the or conservatism in the art space, whatever, and just how like they are their own corporate machine and they want to have a monopoly on quote unquote conservative art. They're not selling art. They are selling conservatism in the art space. It's not the same thing. And George had a really, really great and concise post about it today after the fact. He kind of touched on this in the podcast episode. I'll share it when it goes live. It wasn't my show, it's somebody else's. Anyway, he says, what is conservative art? He goes, it's art that's just made by conservatives. It doesn't have to be about like, ooh, patriotism and I read the Bible and I was saved and whatever. Is it great art? Is it made by a conservative? Sure, it can have conservative themes and characters and whatever, but if you're not, as a creative, and this goes for whatever side of the aisle you're on, if you're not as a creative, if you're not your own biggest critic and you're not analyzing and reading and consuming other works and learning from their strengths and weaknesses to add to your own strength and to shore up your own weaknesses, then like you're not in it for the art. You're just in it for the culture war side of it. And culture wars are just like politics. They're a pendulum, and they're stupid, and I hate them. Like right now, we're in the era where the pendulum has swung very hard back to the right. If you went back to 2008 and said, "Don't worry, in 2024, basically the entire Obama coalition is going to be undone and it's going to be majority red everywhere," like I wouldn't have believed you. Nobody would have believed you because things were so very definitely over because the culture war had definitely been won and there was no hope and blah blah blah, and like the Democrats were in charge of everything. These things just go back and forth because they're not people offering substance. They're just offering victory from their own sides. And then they'll take charge. They won't know what the hell they're doing. They'll screw things up. And people will get pissed and they'll swing back to the other side. And the cycle will just repeat itself over and over again. Focus on just making something great. Be who you are and make something that is great. You're going to have to do that by consuming great art, analyzing great art, studying great art, learning from it, and then going out and creating yourself. All right, like don't get so caught up in the culture side of things. Like, you're only allowed to enjoy this because this person made it, or you're not allowed to enjoy that because that person made it. I was thinking earlier today, there's a series that I need to review here. I did it on the old podcast, but I'm going to do a video about it soon. I don't know anything at all about the politics of the creator, and I don't care. I do know that the main character in this trilogy I'm going to talk about is an agnostic, or like basically atheistic, I can't remember which one, secular humanist, which was completely relevant for how the story goes, because it's about him figuring out how to approach a life after death situation. I'm not going to say anything more than that because I'm going to wait for the video. Like, obviously, I'm a believing, practicing Christian and all that stuff, but there was tremendous value in reading that book from that perspective, and especially because the author took the challenge seriously to create a character like this, give him an afterlife scenario, and then challenge him in that scenario. I think great art is challenging. It doesn't attack you, it challenges you. There's a difference. And that goes just as much in the consumption of it as it does in the creation of it. And I've got no shortage of challenges on the creation side. I've been at this for a very long time, and I'll still sit down to write something, and it challenges me, and that's good. If I was ever to sit down on a bench and try to do a bench press, and it was easy, like what would the point be of continuing to do bench presses? It's the same thing with art. You've got to constantly be getting better at it. I'll cap here with something that I said on that podcast with George Alexopoulos. He kind of paraphrased Louis L'Amour without knowing it, and I brought Louis L'Amour up because me, I'll always work Louis L'Amour into the conversation. That's that. This goes for artists, for illustrators, as well as for authors. Because a writer never knows enough and is never good enough. You got to keep at it. Who was it that said, not too long before he died, there was some author recently, I saw the quote, I'm already forgetting who, he was just a few years away from dying, and he's like, I finally feel like I've gotten good at this. Martin Scorsese has said something to a similar effect, and he's like, what, in his 80s? He's like, the thing that sucks is that I finally feel like I know what I'm doing, and my life is, dude, there's far less left in the tank than there is behind me, or whatever. Very few miles to go before he sleeps, as it were. So, understand that it's a process. You got to keep at it, and in order to get successful at it, you've got to be your own biggest critic. Anyway, those are my general thoughts on the writing side of things, the art side of things. Like, you've got to love art. Don't use it as a rope in a cultural tug of war, because if you do that, you are stupid, and I hate you. Drive safe. See you out there.